The safe behind his desk stands wide open. Stacks of $100 bills spread across his desk like green confetti. More cash than most families see in a lifetime, just sitting there, unguarded, tempting. Thomas appears to be sleeping deeply, his breathing steady and even. But his eyes aren't completely closed. He's watching, waiting, testing. You see, Thomas Mitchell didn't become a millionaire by accident. At 45 years old, he'd built an empire from nothing, climbed every ladder, outsmarted every competitor. But recent events had left him questioning something fundamental about human nature. His business partner, someone he'd trusted for over a decade, had just been caught embezzling $3 million. $3 million. The betrayal cut deeper than any financial loss ever could. So Thomas devised this test, a simple experiment in human honesty. Leave a fortune in plain sight and see who could resist the temptation. He'd already tested 3 different employees over the past month. The results? Disappointing doesn't even begin to cover it. Tonight's subjects arrive right on schedule. The cleaning crew for the night shift. Diana Jefferson, a single mother who'd been working for his company for exactly 2 years, 3 months, and 16 days. Thomas knew her file by heart. 28 years old, high school graduate, no criminal record, always punctual, never complained. And with her tonight, as always, her 6-year-old daughter Jasmine. The little girl bounces through the door wearing miniature pink cleaning gloves, a gift her mother bought to make her feel helpful during school holidays when childcare wasn't an option. Those tiny gloves represent something Thomas has forgotten exists in his world. Pure intention without hidden agenda. Diana begins her routine immediately, starting with the bookshelves that line the office walls. She moves with practiced efficiency, dusting each spine, straightening every row. She's done this same routine hundreds of times. But tonight feels different, because tonight, someone is watching with the intensity of a hawk circling prey. Jasmine wanders the office with the curious energy only children possess. She examines the awards on the walls, peers at the family photos on the desk, traces patterns in the expensive carpet with her small fingers. And then she sees it. The open safe, the scattered money. More cash than her young mind can fully comprehend. Thomas holds his breath. His heart pounds so loudly, he's certain they can hear it across the room. This is the moment. This is when he'll witness yet another confirmation that trust is a luxury he can no longer afford. He prepares himself for disappointment, for the crushing realization that even children aren't immune to greed. But what happens next stops his world completely. Jasmine doesn't grab the money. She doesn't stuff bills into her pockets or call her mother over to see their lucky discovery. Instead, she does something that makes Thomas question everything he thought he knew about human nature. The little girl approaches the desk with careful steps, her pink gloves bright against the dark wood. She looks at the scattered bills with the same expression she might have when seeing toys scattered across a playroom floor. Messy, disorganized, wrong. With delicate precision that would make a bank teller proud, Jasmine begins sorting the money. She separates the hundreds from the 50s, creates neat stacks organized by denomination. Her small hands work with incredible care, as if she's handling something precious and fragile. Each bill gets smoothed, each stack gets perfectly aligned. Thomas watches in stunned silence as this child, who probably never held more than $20 at once in her entire life, organizes a fortune with the dedication of a master craftsman. She doesn't take a single penny, doesn't even seem tempted. She simply sees disorder and decides to fix it. When she finishes, Jasmine steps back to admire her work. The previously scattered money now sits in perfect, organized stacks. She nods with satisfaction, the same way she might after cleaning her bedroom or finishing a puzzle. Then she does something that nearly brings tears to Thomas's eyes. "Mommy," she whispers, just loud enough for Diana to hear from across the room. "Mr. Thomas's money was all messy. I fixed it up just like you taught me to do with our coins at home." Diana turns quickly, her face immediately showing concern. "Jasmine, sweetheart, you can't touch the boss's things." "But it was messy, Mama," the little girl explains with the innocent logic only children possess. "He'll be happy when he wakes up and sees everything neat and tidy." Thomas feels something crack inside his chest. This child, this beautiful, honest child, had just restored his faith in humanity with a simple act of kindness. She told her mother exactly what she'd done, with the transparent honesty of someone who has absolutely nothing to hide. In that moment, Thomas realizes his test revealed something he never expected to find. Not everyone is driven by greed. Not everyone sees opportunity as something to exploit. Some people, even the smallest people, see mess and simply want to make it better. The weight of this revelation settles over him like a warm blanket. For months, he'd been carrying the burden of cynicism, the heavy assumption that everyone had a price, everyone had an angle. But here stands living proof that goodness still exists in its purest form. Diana approaches cautiously, clearly worried about her daughter's interaction with her employer's belongings. She begins to apologize, but Thomas remains perfectly still, maintaining his sleeping act while his mind races with implications far beyond this simple moment. What Thomas doesn't yet realize is that this night will set in motion a chain of events that will transform not just his own life, but expose truths about prejudice, kindness, and human value that will challenge everything he thought he knew about the world. This simple act of childhood honesty is about to become the catalyst for a story that will reveal the true character of everyone involved and prove that sometimes the most profound lessons come from the most unexpected teachers. The test Thomas designed to expose human weakness has instead revealed human strength in its purest form. And the real test? It's just beginning. As Diana gently guides Jasmine away from the desk, Thomas continues his careful observation, but something fundamental has shifted inside him. The cynical armor he'd built around his heart after years of betrayals and disappointments suddenly feels heavy and unnecessary. This child hadn't just organized his money. She'd reorganized his entire worldview. Over the following weeks, Thomas finds himself paying closer attention to Diana and Jasmine during their nightly visits. What he discovers challenges every assumption he's made about people who work in the shadows of his empire. Diana arrives every evening at exactly 6:30, never a minute late, never making excuses. She works methodically through each floor of the building, transforming chaos into order with quiet dignity. But it's her interactions with Jasmine that truly captivate Thomas. He watches through security monitors as Diana turns their work routine into life lessons. When Jasmine finds a wallet left behind by an employee, Diana immediately teaches her the importance of returning it to security. When they discover someone's forgotten lunch in a conference room, Diana explains why they should leave it untouched rather than assume it's unwanted. "We always do the right thing, even when nobody's watching," Diana tells her daughter one evening while cleaning the executive boardroom. Our character isn't about what we can get away with. It's about who we choose to be when the world isn't paying attention. Thomas realizes he's witnessing something extraordinary. This woman, earning barely enough to support herself and her child, possesses a moral compass that points unfailingly toward integrity. She's raising her daughter with values that money can't buy, and privilege often corrupts. But Thomas isn't the only one watching Diana's every move. Richard Blackwood, the company's vice president and heir to old money, has noticed the cleaning woman receiving what he considers undue attention. At 50 years old, Richard carries himself with the entitled arrogance of someone who inherited his position rather than earned it. His corner office reeks of expensive cologne and barely concealed contempt for anyone he considers beneath his station. During a routine financial review meeting, Richard's sharp eyes catch something that makes his blood boil with indignation. "Thomas," he says, stabbing at the budget reports with his gold-plated pen. "Why exactly are we hemorrhaging extra money on janitorial staff? Specifically, on this particular employee." He taps Diana's name with disdain. Thomas keeps his expression neutral, though irritation flickers behind his eyes. Diana is an exceptional worker. Her salary adjustment reflects her value to this company. Richard leans back in his chair, a cold smile spreading across his face. "Exceptional?" He practically spits the word. "Thomas, you need to understand something about these people. Give them an inch, and they'll demand a mile. It's simply their nature." The casual racism hits Thomas like a physical blow, but he maintains his composure. Richard comes from old money, holds significant shares in the company through family connections, and his opinions have always been tolerated by the board because of his financial influence. "Besides," Richard continues, warming to his theme, "she brings that child to work. Completely inappropriate. What kind of mother exposes a kid to a corporate environment? Obviously lacks proper family values." Thomas grips his coffee cup tighter, fighting the urge to respond. He needs to hear more, needs to understand exactly what kind of man Richard truly is beneath the expensive suits and practiced charm. That evening, Thomas witnesses something that transforms his growing suspicion into blazing anger. Richard has stayed late, claiming to review quarterly projections, but Thomas watches through security cameras as the man intercepts Diana in the hallway near the elevators. "Listen carefully," Richard says, his voice carrying the cold authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "I know you're receiving more money than someone like you deserves. I don't know what kind of special arrangements you've made, but they're going to stop immediately." Diana's face goes pale, confusion and fear mixing in her expression. "Sir, I don't understand what you're implying." Richard steps closer, using his height advantage to intimidate. "Of course you don't understand. People like you never do. You just take what you're given and keep your mouth shut. And get that child out of here. This isn't a daycare center." Jasmine instinctively moves behind her mother, her small hands clutching Diana's uniform. The aggressive tone frightens her, though she doesn't fully understand why this man radiates such hostility. Diana wraps a protective arm around her daughter, her voice steady despite her obvious distress. "Sir, I'm simply doing my job to the best of my ability." "Your job," Richard sneers, "is to clean and remain invisible. Nothing more. Don't get ideas above your station." Thomas watches this exchange with growing fury, but also with calculating precision. Richard has revealed his true nature, and Thomas now understands that this isn't just about money or workplace hierarchy. This is about something much deeper and more dangerous. Richard Blackwood represents everything Thomas has grown to despise about inherited privilege. The man uses his position and family connections to terrorize people who can't fight back, people who depend on their jobs to survive. He's a bully with a business degree and a trust fund, but Richard has made a crucial miscalculation. He assumes Thomas is either unaware of his behavior or simply doesn't care enough to intervene. He has no idea that he's just declared war on someone with unlimited resources and an increasingly personal investment in protecting Diana and Jasmine. That night, Thomas makes a phone call that will change everything. "Marcus," he says into his secure line, "I need your services again." Marcus Chen, former FBI investigator turned private security consultant, recognizes the tone immediately. They'd worked together during the embezzlement investigation, and Marcus knows that when Thomas speaks in that particular voice, someone is about to face consequences they never saw coming. "What kind of situation are we dealing with?" Marcus asks. "The kind involving systematic harassment and abuse of power," Thomas replies. "I need everything you can find on Richard Blackwood. Financial records, communication patterns, employment history, personal behavior, everything." Marcus chuckles darkly. Privileged executive with entitlement issues? Those are always the easiest cases. Guys like that leave evidence everywhere because they never think they'll face consequences. As Thomas hangs up the phone, he feels a familiar sensation he hasn't experienced in years. The thrill of the hunt, the satisfaction of turning someone's arrogance against them. Richard Blackwood has spent his entire life using his advantages to crush people who couldn't defend themselves. Now he's about to discover what happens when he targets someone under the protection of a man with infinite patience, unlimited resources, and absolutely no tolerance for injustice. The real test is about to begin, and Richard has no idea he's already failed it. The following Tuesday, Richard escalated his psychological warfare with the calculated cruelty of someone who had never faced real consequences for his actions. He strolled into the Human Resources Department, carrying a manila folder thick with fabricated complaints, his expensive Italian shoes clicking against the polished floor with each step of his manufactured outrage. Sandra Miller, the HR director, looked up from her computer as Richard burst through her door without knocking. At 42, Sandra had seen enough corporate politics to recognize trouble when it walked into her office wearing a 3,000 ictive smile. $100 suit and a VIN. "We have a serious problem with one of our cleaning staff," Richard announced, dropping the folder on her desk with theatrical flair. "Multiple violations, chronic tardiness, unprofessional behavior. This Diana Jefferson situation has gotten completely out of hand." Sandra frowned, pulling up Diana's employment records on her screen. 2 years of perfect attendance stared back at her. Not a single disciplinary note. Not one complaint from any department. "Mr. Blackwood, I'm looking at her file right now, and I don't see any documented issues." Richard's jaw tightened with irritation. "Records can be manipulated, Sandra. I'm telling you directly that this employee has been arriving late consistently, and that child she drags around is causing disruptions throughout the building. I need specific incidents with dates and witnesses," Sandra replied professionally, though something in Richard's demeanor set off warning bells in her mind. "I can't proceed with disciplinary action based on general accusations." Richard leaned forward, his voice dropping to the tone he used when expecting immediate compliance. "I'm the vice president of this company. My observations should carry sufficient weight for appropriate action." What Richard didn't realize was that every word of this conversation was being recorded by the very security system he had personally approved months earlier. Thomas sat in his office 3 floors above, listening through wireless earbuds, documenting every lie with the methodical precision of someone building an airtight case. Meanwhile, Marcus Chen was conducting his own investigation with the thoroughness that had made him legendary in federal circles. His preliminary findings painted a picture of systematic abuse that stretched back over 15 years and multiple companies. "Thomas, you're going to want to see this," Marcus said, sliding a thick dossier across the mahogany desk during their evening meeting. "Richard Blackwood isn't just a casual racist. He's a serial workplace predator with a documented pattern of targeting minority employees." Thomas opened the file, his expression growing darker with each page. Employment lawsuits settled quietly with non-disclosure agreements. Discrimination complaints that mysteriously disappeared from corporate records. A trail of destroyed careers and silenced voices stretching across 3 different companies. "Look at page 15, Marcus continued. Social media posts from private groups where he and other executives share what they call workplace humor. The content would make a Klansman blush. Thomas studied screenshots of conversations where Richard wrote things like, "keeping the help in their place," and "these people need constant reminders of hierarchy." The casual cruelty was breathtaking, but it was also exactly what Thomas needed. "There's more," Marcus said, pulling up additional files on his laptop. "I tracked down 5 former employees who were willing to talk off the record. Same pattern every time. Systematic harassment, planted evidence of misconduct, psychological pressure until they quit rather than fight back." Thomas felt something cold and calculating settle in his chest. Richard had built his entire career on terrorizing people who couldn't defend themselves. But he'd made one critical error in judgment. He'd chosen the wrong target this time. "Marcus, I want real-time monitoring on everything Richard does. Phone calls, emails, movement patterns, social interactions. Legal surveillance only, but comprehensive." "Already in progress," Marcus replied with a grim smile. "The beautiful thing about bullies is they always escalate. Richard thinks he's untouchable, which means he's going to get sloppy and give us exactly what we need." That Thursday evening, Richard crossed a line that transformed Thomas's protective instincts into something approaching divine wrath. Security cameras captured everything as Richard cornered Diana in the parking garage after her shift, blocking her path to the subway entrance, while Jasmine waited nervously beside her mother. "I've been thinking about your situation," Richard said, his voice carrying undertones that made Diana's skin crawl. "A single mother working nights, struggling to make ends meet. I'm curious about what other services you might be willing to provide to supplement your income." The implication hung in the air like poison gas. Diana's face flushed with anger and humiliation, but she kept her voice steady for her daughter's sake. "Mr. Blackwood, what you're suggesting is completely inappropriate and offensive." Richard stepped closer, invading her personal space with deliberate intimidation. "I'm suggesting that people in your position usually understand practical arrangements. I have influence in this company, and I could make things very comfortable for you and your daughter. Or very uncomfortable." Jasmine tugged on her mother's coat, sensing the danger even if she couldn't understand its nature. "Mommy, why is the mean man talking to us?" "Don't worry, sweetheart," Diana replied, her voice carrying a dignity that made Richard's corruption seem even more grotesque. "Some people never learned how to treat others with respect." Richard laughed, a sound devoid of warmth or humanity. "Respect is earned, not given. And people like you earn it on your knees." That was the moment Thomas decided Richard Blackwood's destruction would be total, public, and legendary. From his office, Thomas activated emergency protocols that Marcus had put in place. Within minutes, Additional recording equipment was capturing every angle of the garage confrontation. Legal documentation was being prepared. Journalists were being contacted. The machinery of justice was spinning up to full speed. But Richard wasn't finished revealing the depths of his depravity. Friday night, thinking he was alone in the building, Richard made a phone call that sealed his fate completely. Thomas listened through the enhanced audio system as Richard's voice echoed through his executive office. "Dad, remember that cleaning woman situation we discussed? I need you to activate some of your legal contacts. Create problems for her. Immigration issues, tax complications, anything that will force her to disappear quietly." His father's voice crackled through the speaker system. "Richard, are you certain this is necessary? She's just a cleaning lady." "It's about precedent," Richard replied, his voice carrying the cold calculation of a predator. "If we allow these people to feel too secure, they start getting ideas. Better to handle this before other employees of similar background start thinking they deserve special treatment." Thomas felt his jaw clench as he recorded every word. Richard had just confessed to conspiracy, discrimination, and abuse of power. But more than that, he'd revealed the systematic nature of his prejudice. This wasn't personal animosity. This was ideology. "I'll make some calls," his father replied. "We've handled situations like this before." "Exactly. Keep it quiet, keep it legal-looking, but make sure the message is clear. There are consequences for stepping out of line." As the call ended, Thomas sat in the darkness of his office, feeling the weight of what he'd just witnessed. Richard wasn't just a workplace bully. He was part of a generational system designed to keep certain people in their place through fear, manipulation, and the casual abuse of power. But Richard had made one catastrophic miscalculation. He assumed that Diana was defenseless, that her position made her vulnerable to his threats and schemes. He had no idea that she was now under the protection of someone with unlimited resources and an absolute commitment to justice. Marcus arrived at Thomas's office within the hour, carrying equipment cases and wearing the focused expression of a hunter who just caught scent of his prey. "How bad?" Marcus asked, setting up additional monitoring equipment. "Worse than we imagined," Thomas replied, handing over the audio files. "He's not working alone. This is systematic, generational, institutional. They've been doing this for decades." Marcus listened to the recordings, his expression growing darker with each revelation. "Thomas, this is enough to destroy him completely. Career, reputation, family standing, everything." "Good," Thomas replied with cold satisfaction. "But I want more than destruction. I want transformation. I want to turn this company into everything Richard's worldview says is impossible." What Richard Blackwood didn't understand was that his war against Diana had awakened something in Thomas that had been dormant for too long. A sense of purpose that went beyond profit margins and quarterly reports. A mission to prove that power could be used to protect rather than oppress. The trap was set. The evidence was overwhelming, and Richard was about to discover that some targets fight back with resources he never imagined possible. Monday morning would bring consequences that would reshape not just Richard's life, but the entire corporate culture that had protected men like him for generations. The real test was about to reach its climax, and Richard had no idea he was walking straight into Judgment Day. Monday morning arrived with the crisp efficiency of justice finally finding its mark. Richard Blackwood strutted through the corporate lobby with his usual arrogant confidence, his handmade leather briefcase swinging at his side like a weapon he'd never learned to properly wield. He had no idea that every step carried him closer to a reckoning 15 years in the making. Thomas watched from his office as Richard disappeared into the elevator, bound for what he believed would be another routine day of wielding unchecked power. But today would be different. Today, the predator would become the prey in a trap so perfectly constructed that escape would be impossible. At exactly 9:15, Richard executed his masterstroke with the theatrical precision of a man who had never doubted his own invincibility. He descended to the cleaning supply area where Diana was preparing for an early shift, having been called in to handle additional duties. What Richard didn't know was that Thomas had orchestrated this encounter, creating the perfect stage for Richard's final performance. Hidden in Diana's cleaning cart was a $15,000 Rolex watch, planted there by Richard 30 minutes earlier while she was in the restroom. Security cameras captured every moment of his deception from angles he never knew existed, recording his satisfied smirk as he admired his own cleverness. Diana worked quietly, organizing supplies with the same methodical care she brought to everything in her life. Jasmine sat nearby, coloring in a workbook, her pink gloves folded neatly beside her small backpack. The scene radiated innocence and dignity, making Richard's approaching assault even more heinous. Richard burst into the area with 2 security guards in tow, his voice booming with false authority. "Diana Jefferson, we need to conduct an immediate inspection of your materials. We've received reports of missing items from executive offices." Diana looked up, confusion clouding her features. "Mr. Blackwood, I don't understand. Is there some kind of problem?" "That remains to be seen," Richard replied with theatrical gravity, walking directly toward the cart where he'd planted the evidence. "Let's just say certain expensive items have gone missing, and we need to rule out all possibilities." Thomas watched from multiple camera feeds as Richard reached into the cart with exaggerated surprise, his performance worthy of a community theater production. Well, what do we have here?" He extracted the Rolex with flourish that would have been comedic if the stakes weren't so serious. "Diana, this is a $15,000 timepiece that disappeared from Mr. Mitchell's office yesterday evening. How exactly did it end up in your possession?" Diana's face went ashen, her hands trembling as the implications crashed over her. "I've never seen that watch before in my life. I would never take anything that doesn't belong to me." Richard's smile was pure poison, the expression of a man savoring his victim's terror. "Of course not. I suppose it just magically appeared in your cleaning supplies, didn't it?" Jasmine stood up from her coloring, frightened by the aggressive tone and her mother's obvious distress. "Mommy, what's happening? Why is everyone being mean?" "Quiet, child," Richard snapped with vicious authority. "Your mother has some serious explaining to do." One of the security guards had already pulled out his phone, following Richard's earlier instructions to call the police immediately upon discovering the planted evidence. "This is building security. We need to report a theft in progress." That was the moment Thomas made his entrance, flanked by Marcus Chen and 3 people Richard didn't immediately recognize, but whose professional bearing suggested they weren't casual observers. "Richard," Thomas said with deadly calm, "I think you should tell that guard to hang up the phone." Richard spun around, his confidence flickering for just a moment before reasserting itself. "Thomas, perfect timing. We've caught your cleaning woman red-handed stealing your personal property." Thomas smiled, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "My property? Richard, I haven't owned a Rolex in over 5 years. I wear an Apple Watch exclusively." The first crack appeared in Richard's composure. "What are you talking about? This is clearly your missing timepiece." "Actually," Thomas continued with the patience of a professor explaining basic concepts to a particularly slow student, We have high-definition footage of you purchasing that exact watch this morning and planting it in Diana's cart 47 minutes ago. Marcus stepped forward with a tablet displaying crystal-clear security footage. Angle 1, he announced, swiping to the next video. Angle 2, Angle 3, we even captured your face when you checked to make sure nobody was watching. Spoiler alert, somebody was always watching. Richard's mouth opened and closed soundlessly, like a fish suddenly realizing it was no longer in water. The security guards exchanged confused glances, unsure whether to maintain their aggressive stance or step away from what was clearly becoming a disaster. But there's so much more, Thomas announced with the satisfaction of a magician revealing his greatest trick. Marcus, please show Mr. Blackwood our comprehensive evidence collection. Marcus activated a portable projector, filling the wall with screenshots of Richard's most damning social media posts. The racist comments he thought were private suddenly blazed across the wall in 40-point font, each word a nail in the coffin of his reputation. Need to keep these people in their place, Marcus read aloud in a voice devoid of emotion. That's your post from last Tuesday, isn't it, Richard? Diana gasped, her hand flying to cover her mouth in shock. The casual cruelty of the language hit her like a physical blow, but it also explained so much about Richard's behavior that had previously seemed random. Here's your phone conversation with your father, Marcus continued, switching to an audio file that filled the room with Richard's voice plotting to fabricate legal problems for Diana. And here's your confession that this is about keeping people of certain backgrounds from feeling too comfortable in the workplace. Richard tried to speak, but no sound emerged. The trap had snapped shut with such devastating completeness that even his practiced arrogance couldn't find purchase in this new reality. Jennifer Walsh from Channel 7 News stepped forward, her camera operator positioning for the perfect shot. Mr. Blackwood, would you care to comment on this evidence of systematic racial discrimination and conspiracy to fabricate criminal charges? The word conspiracy seemed to unlock Richard's voice, but only to stammer denials that sounded pathetic even to his own ears. You can't use illegally obtained recordings. I have rights. Of course you have rights, Thomas agreed with mock sympathy. You have the right to remain silent, because anything you say will be used against you by the police, who are already en route to arrest you for attempted fraud, conspiracy, and civil rights violations. Marcus resumed his presentation with the methodical precision of someone who had built cases against organized crime figures. We also have documentation of your 15-year pattern of workplace harassment across 3 different companies. 8 minority employees driven to resignation through systematic intimidation. 3 lawsuits settled quietly by your family's lawyers. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come from the smallest teachers. What began as Thomas Mitchell's cynical test of human nature became a masterclass in how goodness can triumph over prejudice, how courage can protect the innocent, and how a child's pure heart can change the world. 6 months later, Diana Jefferson walked through those same corporate halls, not as a cleaning lady, but as the company's new director of human resources. Thomas had discovered her abandoned business degree and created the position specifically for her talents. Jasmine, now 7, attended the city's finest private school and spoke confidently about becoming a lawyer to help people like Mr. Thomas helped us. Richard Blackwood's fall was as complete as his arrogance had been absolute. After 18 months in prison, he emerged to find his reputation destroyed, his family fortune depleted by legal fees, and his name permanently associated with workplace discrimination. The man who once terrorized the vulnerable now worked minimum wage jobs, refused employment by every reputable company in the city. Thomas transformed his business into a beacon of inclusion, winning national awards for diversity and creating scholarship programs that lifted hundreds of families from poverty to prosperity. The Fair Chance Initiative, named in honor of Diana's case, became a model replicated across corporate America. But perhaps the greatest victory wasn't Richard's downfall or Diana's rise. It was the moment Thomas realized that true wealth isn't measured in bank accounts, but in the lives we choose to protect and elevate. A 6-year-old girl with pink gloves had taught a billionaire that integrity matters more than income, that character trumps capital, and that sometimes the most profound tests reveal not our weaknesses, but our capacity for extraordinary goodness. The real treasure was never in that safe. It was in the heart of a child who saw disorder and chose to create beauty, who faced temptation and chose honesty, who reminded us all that hope lives in the smallest hands and the purest intentions.